car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hello, I'm Art Franklin. We want to welcome you to the attorneys. It's so glad to have you with us. It's an opportunity to share some really valuable information with you. And as we're getting started, attorneys at Hollis Wright right now are manning the phones. They're getting ready to take your calls at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That call is free. It is confidential, so go ahead and get started making your calls to Hollis Wright right now. We've got a great show lined up for you. He is Josh Wright, managing partner at Hollis Wright. We've got a very special guest with us, Greg Stanley, as we are talking about real estate scams. Josh?
Yeah, first of all, great intro. Love it. And, you know, people sometimes question, I get calls all the time like, hey, are lawyers really standing by to answer calls, texts, emails? I hope people will recognize tonight we're here to answer calls, texts, and emails, and we do that every Sunday night, and so we're happy to do it. This is an interesting topic. So, Art, I did some research prior to kind of the show, and Greg and I talked just before we went on air here about kind of the prevalence of real estate-based scams and fraud. And in some of these cases, the average or the median itself is a $70,000 scam or $70,000 fraud, which is a huge number when you think of that relative to the median cost of financing a house. So this is kind of a big deal nationally. It's a topic I don't think we've ever done before on the show in the 600 and some shows we've done. And so I'm really excited to have you on to talk about this and real estate scam and what you can do to protect yourself. Before we get started, though, talk a little bit, Greg, about your firm and kind of how you got into this area of the law, because it's an interesting, unique area.
Well, thanks, Josh. So my firm is we're a little firm in, we have an office in Irondale and an office in Bessemer, and we started off doing just real estate and helping folks figure out how to clear their titles and things like that. And as we did more and more closings, we started seeing a trend, an increasing trend, I should say, of people that were selling property that they didn't own.
That becomes a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
So if someone comes into our office and they say, hey, can you give us a quitclaim deed? You know, a quitclaim deed means I don't know what I own, but I'm selling whatever I own to you. And so the person who's selling thinks that they're not breaking the law. It's kind of like, hey, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I can sell you, right. You know. Well, the problem is that the person that they're selling it to may not realize that they really don't own anything. So we always do a quick check to make sure that the person who's selling, the grantor, actually has some interest in the property. And we started finding out that sometimes they didn't. They had no interest and they were pretending to sell this property. And the person who's buying it, generally a less sophisticated investor, maybe a person who wants their first home, you know, and they had no idea that they weren't buying anything. And I started talking to a realtor friend of mine, and the trend, though, you should know, none of those deals had realtors involved. It was always some guy who was selling this property, but when the realtors get involved, the realtors seem to figure these things out before it gets to us.
Gotcha. And is that one of your recommendations, is considering using a realtor to avoid potentially running into some of these scams?
Absolutely, it really is. There's been recent legislation that appears to try to make it so that buyer's agents will be less valuable in the future. And that legislation goes, I believe it just went into effect in Alabama.
Yeah.
However, and I've got no interest in real estate agencies. I don't own any interest in that. However, what I've seen is when people try to sell property that they don't own, the realtors generally catch it.
Yeah.
I'd like to give you a quick story.
Yeah, please.
And this is a true story. So this person called this broker friend of mine and said, hey, I want to sell my property. And the broker said, great, I'm going to send you an email. The seller responds back with an email that said, John Jones, and that was his address, was john.jones@outlook.com.
Okay.
And he said, I'm John Jones, and I want to sell this property that I own. And so the realtor, he sends the contracts, and they get the whole thing listed, and everything's ready to be listed. And then, because there were some typos in the email, because of typos, the broker started checking, and he found out that this guy had no interest in the property. He wasn't John Jones. He had gone and created a fake email. And what he had said he wanted to do was he wanted to do everything remote because he's out of state. And that's another key for you is if the person you're dealing with says, well, I'm out of state, and therefore I won't be able to meet you to show you the rental, or I won't be able to be there to sign the contract.
These things are getting more sophisticated for sure.
I know as you were talking, Greg, that just came to mind that you guys can pick up on it, a real estate agent can pick up on it, but what are the signs that I should pick up on that it possibly is a real estate scam?
Number one, if they're asking you for money before the deal, we have a showing fee of $50. It could be all they're trying to get is your $50. Right. You just have to Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, whatever me, $50. And then I will meet you and show you the property. That's a scam.
Mm-hmm. What are just so we can kind of unwrap this for people that are watching tonight, what are examples that you see most prevalently that are scams that people need to be aware of?
The number one scam that I experience is fake realtors. Okay. People, and they call themselves wholesalers. Now, I'm not indicting every single wholesaler, out there, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there are some wholesalers that follow the law. I just never met one.
Mm-hmm. But not indicting them. I get it.
So, and some of my clients are wholesalers. So, but I make sure that they understand the law. I make sure that they understand the ethics of how they're doing things. Your typical wholesaler will do this. They will send you a card that says, "Hey, I'm interested in moving to your town," or something, pretending that they want to buy your house and move in with their 3.2 kids and have the white picket fence and all that. And typically, they target people who are over 60, whose houses are paid off, and they make these offers, and they get these folks into contracts by sending this card and saying, hey, I want to buy this myself, And I had this one elderly gentleman come into the office. This was about 3 years ago. He was probably the first one that I saw. And he came in and he showed me this contract, and he said, I signed this contract with this guy, and I don't know what to do because I can't even get a hold of him anymore. It was a 2-year contract. The fellow said, I want to buy your house, but I need 2 years to get everything in order. What he had done was he had just tied that house up, and then he was marketing it. He was listing it on Facebook Marketplace and things like that.
To try and resell it himself.
To sell it before he ever bought it. He never intended to buy the house.
Goodness.
He didn't even want to do what we call a double close, where he buys it and then he sells it to someone else.
Yeah.
What he wanted to do was just assign his right to buy it and then take the difference between what the value of the house was that he sold it for and what he convinced this elderly gentleman to do.
I know we're about to go to break right now. When we come back, though, I want to talk, and I want to have Greg Art talk a little bit about some of the other scams that we've seen, whether it's double booking mortgages, some of the requests for cash, things that people need to be aware of. Be some good tips.
I also want to know about, what kind of protection I have, because all that information is on public information out there, and I guess that's how they get that information and then target you. So we've got a lot to talk about. I know we're just getting started here, and this is a topic that you need to go ahead and call someone and say, get on and watch this show, watch the attorneys right now, because they're talking about real estate scams and some of the things that go on with that. I want to remind you again that we've got attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That call is free, it's confidential. We also have information scrolling at the bottom of the screen. You see 2 numbers there. You can text your questions to those numbers and also get to Hollis Wright that way. We're just getting started, a lot to talk about. Taking a break now. We'll be back after this.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best: help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
At Hollis Wright, we pride ourselves on having a bedside manner that's second to none. That means we listen more than we speak, and we return calls to current and potential clients. Our attorneys are standing by right now. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
And welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. Throughout the show, I want you to take a moment and see that useful information that we put on the screens. Not only do we talk about things, we're also putting additional information on there. We want to keep you informed. And today, our topic is on real estate scams. And Josh, understand the FBI is reporting that people lost more than $350 million in real estate scams. That just blows my mind.
Well, and it goes back to that concept of the median loss is $70,000. And when you compare that to the relative value of homes across the United States, I mean, that's just a gigantic number and things that people need to be careful of. I mean, you know, and I know you see this when people come to you, but are there outs? Let's say someone has been the victim of a wire scam. Are the banks generally working with them to try and unwind those wires? I mean, what are you seeing there?
I've seen both sides. I've seen where buyers will have second thoughts, and 5 days, 6 days, and maybe a week after the sale, they will contact their bank and say, "Hey, I'm the victim of wire fraud. Right. I sent this money, and I don't really want to buy the property." But the banks don't respond very kindly to those. Yeah. On the other hand, it's been our experience that the banks work really hard when it's a legitimate wire scam. Now, I'm going to say this partly for my own preservation here, but also because, you know, it's true. We've never had that problem in my firm. We have a secure system that we use to communicate with the buyers and the sellers and the realtors and those sorts of things. And we're not the only ones. I want to be clear that the number one thing that a consumer can do to protect themselves is to use a professional. Use a professional realtor, use a professional closing agent or escrow agent. If you're giving the money directly to your seller, it's probably a scam.
Yeah. What we had talked a little bit about wholesalers. as I recall, there's some legislation out there that has kind of been in the works in Alabama that impacts wholesalers and the role they can play in real estate transactions. Where does that stand right now?
Well, the real estate industry, the realtors that I know and the real estate attorneys such as myself, we're very excited about this. The law has already passed, and it doesn't have a lot of teeth yet. However, the law is there, so now it can build. The first law that was passed is that wholesalers now they must reveal to their seller that they're a wholesaler. They can't come in, well, they lawfully, they can't come in and say, hey, I want to buy this and move in and make this our home and appeal to those emotions. They have to say, I'm a wholesaler. I'm going to sell this thing to someone else. And so that's already done. That legislation has passed. There is legislation right now that we believe is going to pass that says wholesalers will have to have a license. The draft of the legislation I read didn't say what license they need to have. So I suspect it'll either be they have to have a real estate license, which is what, in my humble opinion, that's really what they should have, because realtors, they have training and ethics training and recurring ethics training and things like that. And but it could be that they're going to create some sort of a wholesaler license. Which hopefully, once that gets instituted, and again, the executive comes back and puts some teeth into it, then they'll have those ethics trainings and the requirements and the standards.
Well, and also another thing, you're then going to be able to check and confirm someone actually has a license to operate in Alabama, and it will limit the number of scams.
The type of protection that we were talking about as we were heading to break, because we look out there, there's so much of our information that is public record, and people have access to that. And I get the sense that's how they target us and get these scams going. We only touched on the surface. Talk about all these different scams out there so people can understand what they should be looking for.
There's a particular scam. There's an English comedian called Joe Lycett. You ever seen this fella?
No.
He's a young fella, and he tells a story about a friend of his who wanted to rent a piece of property, and it's a person who called themselves Gemma said, hey, look, I have this property, I want to rent it, I'm ready to lease it out to someone. And this comedian makes it very humorous, but ultimately the point of the story was, if you're trying to rent property and the landlord won't meet you and they want money to show you the property, you're probably looking at a scam. Another thing is, and I was actually, on the way here today, I was talking to one of my clients who has a lot of rental properties. And he said, well, I've rented properties without even meeting the people. I said, well, how do people protect themselves? He said, the number one way is to do just a little bit of research. Just search the address and see who owns that property, because, Zillow and those sorts of places, they will give you enough information to determine if that house is actually for rent, and potentially who it is who should be renting it.
Wire scams are another thing that have been prevalent. Now, I'll tell you something that I've seen. I have an individual that came to us a while ago indicating that someone called them and said that they had owed taxes that were in arrears, that they had to pay them within 30 days or their time was going to run out. And luckily, they recognized that was a scam. But that's a good example, because sometimes people do get in arrears with their taxes. And in theory, there are entities out there that can buy those tax liabilities that you've got to pay off to get clear title to your property. So you've got to be real careful on who you're paying for that.
Tied right into that is what that is it's an encumbrance on the property. It's, they will record this lien. And one of the things that these wholesalers will do is if, and we've had personal experience with this, I mean, my firm does, if the wholesaler, if the buyer comes to us and they say, what's going on with this? And we say, well, that's obviously not a good contract. We learned in law school what has to be in a contract, right? And these contracts, typically, they're not written by lawyers. So the contracts are, for some reason or other, they're not enforceable. When we tell our clients, hey, this thing's not enforceable, and they tell, their wholesaler this, the wholesaler will record an encumbrance on that property saying that they have a contract to sell it. And now we actually go and we have to sue that wholesaler to get them to release that encumbrance, which is an unlawful encumbrance.
Yeah.
It's a cloud
Josh,
on the title.
And Josh, you said something else before we went to break. We talked about we buy ugly houses.
Yeah.
We hear about that. See that all the time.
Yeah.
That's something. Does that raise a red flag for you?
It does, absolutely. We buy ugly houses. Those are probably wholesalers and they're probably scammers. And what they do is it's really high pressure. We're going to only give you this. We're only going to give you this offer right now today, and even if you do, I have fun with these. When I get these, I say, send me an offer. Just email me an offer, mail me an offer. They already have my address. They sent me the card or whatever, And so they will send me an offer. And the offers are funny because they're like, we have these costs up front, like, well, we have to do a survey of your property. Okay, my survey is in the middle of a subdivision. It hasn't been surveyed in 50 years because it's in the middle of a subdivision, Nobody needs a survey on this property, but they're going to say, oh, we have to have a survey, and you're going to have to pay that up front, $950. Now, even if you're wanting to borrow money, the only thing that you should pay up front would be the appraisal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's really good information too, because that really is everything you should pay up front, to the extent that you're trying to sell your piece of property. We're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to protect yourself. We touched on it in the first segment, but I want to talk a little bit about the importance of using real estate agents. Coming to a guy like you, making sure that you're evaluating to determine whether or not the money that you're wiring is going to a legitimate bank, those types of things. Let's talk about that when we come back, because those are some things that will help people.
All right, so go ahead and put a pin on it right there. Also remind you to follow Hollis Wright on all social media platforms, on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those social media platforms. You can get information throughout the week, so you don't have to just wait until Sunday night to be with us, but we want you to follow us there. Also, those numbers at the bottom of the screen, you can text your questions to those numbers. There's 2 numbers there. The other number, so important, 1-844-LAW-TALK. An attorney from Hollis Wright standing by right now to take your call. It's free, it's confidential. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. Did you know when you hire Hollis Wright, you are still in charge of your case? Our attorneys at Hollis Wright are client-centered, allowing you to help us control your case and result. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
And welcome back. Glad you are staying with us as we discuss real estate scams. There's so much yet to get into. This is also your final opportunity to reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. 1-844-LAW-TALK. They're standing by live to take your call. It's a free and confidential call. Got a little bit time left, but we've got a little bit of time left to still talk about real estate scams.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to talk about, Greg, in this final segment is just understanding what are some things that you can do kind of to protect yourself, making sure that you don't fall into a scam, making sure that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's and either selling the property that you own or purchasing a piece of property you think you are supposed to own.
The number one thing is have somebody who's a professional help you. I know that it seems to be very vogue right now to try to sell your own property, try to buy without a realtor, because we're going to try to save 3% or whatever. And I got to tell you, realtors, they make that money because they earn that money. They are protecting us. I've been a real estate attorney focusing on real estate for 13 years, and I just sold a condo in Vestavia Hills, I hired a realtor. You know, because I don't know all the ins and the outs of the selling part of it.
Yeah.
That's what he does. So to answer your question, the thing that I think that you and me and everybody else can do is use somebody local, meet somebody face to face, have a realtor who you know. Never send money directly to your seller. To your seller. Make sure that you use an escrow agent. An escrow agent is the attorney who does the closing for you. So the attorney is going to take care of that. They're going to make sure that the person really owns what they're selling and that they are who they say they are.
Yeah. And the escrow is a very important component. Of course, lawyers have what we call trust accounts, which in essence are escrow accounts too, where money is held until it's cleared and everyone's approved it and then it's distributed appropriately. But point being is that an escrow company agent is going to make sure that you've got clean title, that you're purchasing what you're supposed to before the money is released down the road. And by the way, there are also safeguards in place where lawyers have already done checks on the property to make sure that the proper buyer is purchasing from the proper seller and that it is appropriate to release the money. In addition, there are bonds in place with a lot of these escrows where if there is some fraudulent or scam transaction, there's a way to be able to recoup your money to protect yourself. So I do agree that's probably the easiest way to do it, is to get real estate agents involved. Now, one question I have is, with the creativity that is going to be in place and the ability to leverage and negotiate these real estate agreements now that the real estate commissions have all changed nationally, do you foresee potential future scams moving forward, given how aggressive that marketplace will be?
100%. There's been scammers since the days of the Bible, and there's going to be scammers as we go forward. The one thing that I can say that is the way that we can continue to protect ourselves is to talk to somebody face to face. Let me give you one final story.
Yeah, please.
So, it didn't happen to us. This is one that happened to. It was in Birmingham, and it was my realtor broker friend who told me. Right the day of the closing, the buyer got an email from the realtor saying, "Hey, the wiring instructions have changed. Here's the wiring instructions." And so the buyer wired to the new instructions, except for what they didn't notice was that there was one extra letter at the end of that person's name on that email address, and the entire email was fake. Yeah. Now that means that somebody knew that realtor, knew that deal, so the information was out, but all this person had to do was send an email. If you get an email changing something important like that, call, speak to the realtor, speak to someone you know.
Yep. Thanks for being on. Did a great job. I mean it. This is really important stuff for the viewing audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, Greg, thank you again. We have covered a lot of ground talking about real estate scams. So glad you could join us here, and you can still make that call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. We've got attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by to take your call right now. We're going to do it again next week, same time, same place. So make sure you join us for another episode of The Attorneys. So glad to have you with us. We'll see you back here next time.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.